Well, welcome to the League of Women Voters presentation on what you need to know before you vote. This has to do with the MSSD school tax referendums that we're facing in November. And I want to thank all of you for coming. The League is a nonpartisan organization that does not support candidates. We don't support parties. We support the voters. And that's what we're here for. We're here to make sure that the voter has the information they need to make up their own mind, what they'd like to do. So thank you very much for coming. And I'd like to start with our land acknowledgement. No, I'm going back and forth. There's only two. All right.
Yeah, technology is great when it works, right? Oh, well, then instead of looking at the screen, you'll just have to listen to me. Oh, there it is. Yay, thank you. And thank you all for coming tonight. The League formation began more than a century ago in 1920 with women's suffrage, but nearly 2 centuries ago, even prior to the 1848 creation of the state of Wisconsin, an 1832 treaty forced the Ho-Chunk to cede their territory of Tijaf, 4 Lakes. Both the federal and state governments repeatedly but unsuccessfully sought to forcibly remove the Ho-Chunk people of Wisconsin. Truth and acknowledgement are critical to building mutual respect and connections across all barriers of heritage and difference. We continue this effort to acknowledge what has been buried by honoring the truth. In Dane County, we are all standing on the stolen ancestral lands of Ho-Chunk people. We pay respect to their elders, past, present, and future. Please take a moment to consider the many legacies of violence, displacement, migration, and settlement that brings us together today. League of Women Voters Dane County is grateful for the past, present, and future guidance of Wisconsin's Native nations.
Thank you very much for that. The League of Women Voters wants the government to listen to its people, and it does that by voting. In case you didn't know, November 5th is election day. And there are a number of deadlines that are available. There are handouts over there if you need to know. But we hope that this inspires you to cast an informed ballot. If you're inspired by this presentation and want to talk it over with folks, we have a number of different discussion groups that are going to be following this in the weeks to come. Just email me at program@lwvdanecounty.org to let me know, and we'll set you up with one of the discussion groups. We'd love to have you participate. The League does take positions on stands like the constitutional amendment that's happening that will be on the November ballot, where it's changing every citizen can vote to only citizens can vote. Only one word, but it makes a difference. The League of Women Voters of Wisconsin is having a webinar on that on November the 17th. You're welcome to register for that. It will be recorded. I recommend that you view that so that you can get informed about the difference one word can make. We have a number of other events planned. In November, we're going to have a book discussion on a book regarding Wisconsin gerrymandering. in December. Of course, we don't know what's going to happen in November, but we do know we're going to be using the Electoral College. And we do know we have a new map that we're using. And maybe something else. So that we'll be sort of reviewing what happened in November and December. We will, in January, we're going to do a program on responsible gun laws. And in February, we'll have a book discussion on One Nation Under God, Guns, Nation Under Guns. So that's an interesting book. I hope that you all participate in that. If you'd like to help out with the League of Women Voters, I know there's a number of members who are here tonight. Please do. You can go to that website there. And if you have not already, when you signed in, there are other ways that you can help. This is an organization that works on volunteers. So we would love to have your help in so many different ways. You will notice, hopefully, that we had a little ballot there in the beginning that has a number of different topics. We want to know what you want us to cover. We want to know, is there something you'd like to learn more about? Or is there something that you think that the voters should know more about? Pick 3. Other is an option, so you can fill it in. I hope that you fill out your ballot, and before you leave, deposit it at the door. Okay, now I will introduce our esteemed moderator, Julie Underwood. She's nationally recognized as authority on school law and a staunch proponent of public education. She became a dean of the School of Education in 2005. She oversaw a school that was built upon its research prowess and highly regarded national standing, while at the same time finding ways to address the needs of Wisconsin public schools. She led in the $34 million expansion and renovation of the education building on Bascom Hill, which was completed in 2010. Dr. Underwood has also helped establish the Wisconsin Center for Educational Products and Services that helps license and market innovative educational products created by the faculty, staff, and students. And so, with no further delay, let me pass over the program to Julie Underwood. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you all for being here. And thank you very much for your interest in the Madison School District and in education. You know, the whole conversation about the League of Women Voters being nonpartisan, just as a way of context, it wasn't that long ago that public education was a nonpartisan issue. And unfortunately, over the last years, it has unfortunately become a much more partisan issue. And in some ways, it's often seen as a very polarizing and divisive issue, which is not good for our nation, not good for our state, and not good for our communities. And most of all, it's not good for our children. So nonpartisan conversation is what we're having, even though in many situations, there may be a party line on one side or the other. But public education really is a nonpartisan community issue. So I'll tell you how we're going to run this tonight. We have 3 speakers, and they each have a different part of the referenda that we're going to be looking at in November for the Madison Metropolitan School District. And I'm going to introduce all 3 of them, and then we're going to go through their talks. We've asked each one of them to keep their talks to, 15 minutes-ish. And then we're going to come back and do questions and answers and conversation. There are little note cards that are floating around. And as you think of a question or a comment or a concern, if you would go ahead and write that down while we're in this part, in this mode. At the end of this mode, we'll collect them all, and I'll shuffle, and I won't pull them out of a hat. I will shuffle them, and we'll answer as many of them, or engage in conversation about as many of them as we can. Right? What else? We okay, Martha? Got it? All right. Then I'm going to do my introductions. Jason Stein is going to be speaking first, and he's going to be giving us an overview of Wisconsin school finance, which usually would take about 7 or 8 hours for the first part of it. And then do the modern school finance, which would take another 7 or 8 hours. And he's going to do this in 15 minutes. So y'all be kind to him, because this is like tough stuff. But he's well equipped to do that. He comes from the Wisconsin Policy Forum. He was there as the vice president and research director starting in 2018, and then recently in 2024, July of 2024, which is recently, he became president of the Wisconsin Policy Forum, which does a great job in the state of Wisconsin for nonpartisan research on all sorts of issues. In his time with the forum, his reports have received multiple awards from governmental research associations. And before joining the forum, he worked as a Capitol reporter for the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel and the Wisconsin State Journal. So Jason's going to start off, and then Kayla Wynn is going to talk about the capital referendum and thinking about facilities in that way. She joined the Cap Times in 2021, and oops, wait, I have to forward this. Yes. No, don't forward this. Oh, you did it the other way. So, okay. All right, stay tuned and I'll introduce the rest of them. I'll do it the right way. Okay. We'll do it that way. So we're gonna hear Jason talk about everything you ever wanted to know about school finance, even though you didn't know you wanted to know it. Is that that's the title of your presentation, right?
Sure, why not?
And Jason, I'm going to ask you to come up here.
Okay.
Because we are, although I don't think we said this yet, we're on Zoom, right? Do we have other people who are not in the room with us? So it's easy for them to see you if you're up here.
Okay. Well, hello, everybody. Thank you for the kind introduction and the opportunity to speak to you. So I've been told to do this in 15 minutes, and by golly, I'm going to do it. Just bear with me, and there, you can save your questions till the end. So here's a brief discussion of the budget and the state, policies that affect it. And these numbers are as of June. And I'm sure Bob Soldner, the CFO of the school district, would want you to know that these numbers are subject to change, and they will change in many cases, but these are the best numbers we have at this moment. The forum annually analyzes the Madison School District budget, the Milwaukee Public Schools budget, the City of Madison, Milwaukee County, City of Milwaukee budget, and the state budget on every 2-year basis. We don't take positions for or against the budgets themselves or any of the policies in them. We leave that to you guys. All right. So to look at, we are seeing a big increase in school referenda. I saw today that the Wisconsin Association of School Boards is reporting there will be 137 referenda from 120 districts on the November ballots. I have not independently looked at those numbers yet. They would be 79 operating and 58 borrowing referenda. We would have 3 of them here in Madison, and that's what we'll talk about. Why are we seeing the school referenda? It's several reasons. One, enrollment has fallen at school districts around the state, including at Madison in recent years, and we'll talk about that. The state has limited school district revenues in an effort to hold down property taxes. That was particularly true in the previous state budget, and we'll talk about that. Inflation also rose very rapidly in 2022 and 2023. At the same time, teacher turnover rose, and districts reacted by increase in various ways, but one of the ways they reacted was by increasing wages, in particular for this school year. That was, and they did that more quickly than their revenues were increasing. So, and we'll talk a little bit, and that's true in Madison as well at MMSD. And then last, federal pandemic relief aid was a big, for several years, was a big lifeline for districts, but that is running out in 2024 and won't be a factor in 2025, which of course the 2025 budget is what we're here to talk about. All right, so very quickly, you can see that enrollment has fallen over recent years for Madison School District. And this is not a headcount enrollment. This is a form of enrollment that directly relates to the form that is used to set district revenue limits. We'll explain what those are in just a second. But basically, from 2017 to 2024, you see about a 1,300 student drop under that count. And I know that the slope of that line probably looks like a gradual drop to many of you in the audience, but that really is a tremendous impact to the finances of the district. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. So then on the next slide, I referenced revenue limits. Well, what are those? So the revenue limit is really, when we talk about the school referendum to raise revenue, what that essentially is it's a vote on whether or not to exceed the revenue limit that the state imposes on the school districts. And all that revenue limit is, it's on a per pupil basis. So it's the amount of additional revenue, the amount of revenue that a school district can raise from state general school aids, essentially, and local property taxes. And that combined is your revenue limit. All right. Now, the chart at the right shows the revenue limit plus a related form of state aid called per pupil aid. And it shows you in each year the annual percentage change in both the revenue limit, which is the dark blue line, and then inflation, the consumer price index, which is, sort of the main measure of inflation in the United States. And that just shows you the annual change in those two metrics. And one thing that you notice in recent years, during the previous state budget for 2 years, the revenue limit was frozen. No per pupil increase was given by the state. At that time, obviously, for one of those years, the consumer price index hit 8-9% on an annual basis. So those two numbers were not jiving well together at that period of time. And to some degree, that's really part of what we're dealing with now when you see a number of school ballot measures coming up. All right, so here is a look at the revenue limit, the total revenue limit plus the per pupil aid for the Madison schools going back over the past 30 years, including a projection for 2025 if no referendum is approved. And so you can see a couple things. The total revenue limit for MMSD plus this additional form of aid is roughly equal in 2024 to what it was in 2004 after you adjust for inflation. But it is down quite a bit from the peak in about 2020, 2021. So, and that drop in the line that you see there is because of inflation. I mean, on a nominal basis, not adjusted for inflation, the revenues have continued, have been up, but inflation has been so rapid that you see that decrease. And then for this next slide, we'll show you not the total revenue, but just the average per pupil revenue for the Madison Public Schools for MMSD compared to the statewide average. And here you can see that on a per pupil basis, the revenue is actually down a little bit from where it was 20 years ago. 2024 is a little bit less than 2004. It is worth noting that 2004, lately we've just been doing a 20-year comparison at the forum. We did it for MPS, and so I did it in this case. 2004 is a little bit of a spike for MMSD because there was a kind of an odd 1-year referendum that was in place that year and was temporary. But you see, again, this same downward trajectory in recent years, again, because the revenues are not keeping pace with inflation. And here's just a look at some of those same numbers from the previous charts. If there were no referendum, the overall MMSD operating referenda in 2025, the best projection we have right now would be for that to fall by $22 million, or about 4%. The referendum, the operating referendum, so that's the first of the two different school referenda that we will discuss tonight. In 2025, that would add an additional $30 million to the school district budget, the operating budget. And by 2028, it would add, over a 4-year period, you'd phase up to $100 million increase. Now, that is a significant increase. As you can see, the revenue limit right now is at $404.5 million. And so you can see that $100 million is significant on that number. The other thing that is really important to understand about a referenda, and it's really hard to get this idea across and to have it stick in people's minds, but it is not a change to the revenue limit exactly over what it is today. It's a change over what it otherwise would be in the future. So in other words, the revenue limit could go up or down over the next 4 years, and then the change that the voters, that all of you will vote on, will be a change to that, whatever that future number is. So there could be increases on top of the 100 million, but that would depend on what the trajectory of the revenue limit is. Or, the revenue limit could fall somewhat, and then the overall increase would be somewhat less. So that's an important thing to remember, and kind of a complicated thing to keep in your mind. I have to remind myself about it at times. All right, so here's just a look. Okay, I got 5 minutes here, so we'll roll through these final slides as quickly as we can. Here is a look at the Madison School District's per pupil revenue limit, which is the blue column, versus on the left panel is the other 9 largest districts in the state. And at the right panel is 9 area school districts that are adjacent to Madison. And so you can see, where Madison falls. It's on the high end of both. It's 15,435 is per pupil is the revenue limit now. Again, about 3,800 would be added to that, with the caveats that the revenue limit is a moving target over time, and the number of pupils is a moving target over time. Oh, what did I do? Okay, here we go. And then, so just to give you one caveat as we compare the funding levels of districts, the needs of Madison students are, when you look at the other large districts in the state, comparable. However, when you compare Madison to other districts in Dane County, the surrounding districts, Madison has greater needs than its suburban peers. It has more low-income students, more English learners, more students with disabilities, or I think it's tied with McFarland in terms of its percentage of students with disabilities, but in general has more students with needs than surrounding districts. All right, here's just a quick look at the district has roughly $40 million budget shortfall. Here's just a quick look at some of the factors that have contributed to it. And I'll just actually skip to the next slide that has a little bit on that. The school district used stimulus funding to fund 111 positions in the current budget. That stimulus funding will not be available in 2025. So the district either needs to eliminate those positions, or as it proposes, come up with its, state and local funding for those positions. That, we talked about the wage increase. There's an 8% base wage plus a 2% steps and lanes wage increase for 2024 that was funded through drawing down district reserves. And so again, the district has got to find then a way for in 2025 to fund that, since there was not in the current budget a sustainable funding source for that. And then finally, healthcare costs and, more limited raises and other things add to the cost in 2025. And again, all of this is as of where the budget was in June of this year, and there have been some changes to that. So that's my little caveat that I keep giving. And here you can see what has happened to teachers' base wages, which is the dark blue bars, and then the light blue bars represent the additional pay in the salary schedule for experience and education, like having a master's degree and things like that. So that's at least a look at what's happened with those. And then the black line is what's happened with inflation over time for the district. Yeah. 1 minute, but I'm almost there. I'll let Kayla talk more about the capital referendum. It is a $507 million referendum that would be amortized, with that borrowing would be amortized over more than 2 decades. One thing that we do point out for the district and voters to evaluate is both the facility ratings tend to be C's or D's for the facilities that the district is looking at either renovating or replacing. Some of them do have a utilization rate, which is, the capacity, the number of students in the school divided by the number of students who could be served in the school according to the district's documents at below 60%. So that's something that policymakers and the public may want to consider as they think about, these facilities and the substantial cost that there would be to renovate them. All right, and then we got to keep going very quickly. Worth noting that right now, under the projections, if the referenda does not pass, the gross property tax levy for the Madison schools would fall roughly 4% in December on December tax bills. So the referendum would be a change to that current trajectory. And the moderator has asked me to mention to you, so I must do this, that this is the gross property tax levy for the Madison schools, does not include tax credits such as the school levy tax credit, that even though it has school in the name, is something that the state pays out to localities to lower property tax bills and does not actually represent money that goes to the school district to increase school district spending. Check that box. And now here's my last slide. I'm probably a couple minutes over at this point, but this is just a look at, based on our current projection, the current projection by the district, what would be the impact of the referenda. And it would be that on the capital referenda, it would be $327 per year. On the operating referendum, it would be $317 for the average value home in 2025 and $1,050 by 2028. So the impact in 2028 and thereafter, at least up till the bonds are paid off on the capital referendum, it would be a little under $1,400. And that again that is over what the property tax bill what the property tax levy otherwise could be under state law and under the decisions made by the school board. So again, when people think about that, it isn't necessarily to where the bill is now, but that is a little bit of a moving target. So with that, I have to sit down, and hopefully I haven't gone too far over. Thank you.
That was 15-ish, right? That was 15-ish. So let me see. I mean, this stuff is really complicated, so sometimes you have to summarize it. And this is my own personal summary. Personal, just me. Jason started out with why would we need a referendum? And one of the reasons was in large part because we have revenue limits that are set by the state mandated revenue limits that started 30 years ago, and they're spending limits. You can't spend any more than that. State sets it. You can only increase it one of two ways. The state increases it, or we increase it by local votes, a referendum. And that state mandated part of it hasn't kept pace with inflation. And actually, these days, statewide, we're behind inflation by more than $3,000 per student. And that would only set us back to 2010, which I refer to as regular broken. So it wouldn't be better. I mean, it would just put us back to where we used to be. And I've heard people say we aren't going back. So that's what that would do. And $3,000 per child, when you do the math, is real money. Over $3,000 per child. Think about it adding up in every classroom, in every building, in every district across the state. And this is true across every district in the state, which has resulted in a record number of operating referenda all across the state of Wisconsin over the last few years. And this year already, we've had I think 90, is that right? 90-ish in April. And we know we're going to have about 120 districts go to referendum in November. So it's just that. And also in the COVID piece, the state told the districts to basically use their COVID money and withheld funds rather than spending money on school districts last budget cycle. They told them to use their COVID money, which has now been used up, all while amassing a record state surplus. Is that right? I think so. But that's just my view. That's just my own interpretation. So facilities, we're going to do a quick run on facilities. Kayla Wynn, as I started as a Cap Times reporter, and she started with the Cap Times in 2021, and she covers K-12 education, and she's also covered higher education. I know, and prior to the Cap Times, she worked for the Wisconsin State Journal as a city news intern, and she's freelanced in a number of publications in Chicago. Her work has also appeared in the Associated Press, the Chicago Reader, Chalkbeat, and which is an education piece, and also in a number of other publications. Plus, she serves as an adjunct professor at the University of Wisconsin-Madison School of Journalism. Thanks. Kayla.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. I'm here to give you a quick guide to the facilities referendum. And full disclosure, I am by no means a school finance expert. I'm still figuring out how to pay my own taxes with the help of my dad, of course. So all that's to say, direct all your difficult questions to Dr. Gothard and Jason, and I'll take the easy ones. In all seriousness, though, I have been following this closely as a K-12 reporter for the Cap Times, and I hope that I can give you just the basic information you need to know in order to cast an informed vote. Of course, it's not everything you need to know, but there is a ton of information out there from other reporters and the district itself. I see Bob out there. He's the district's finance administrator. So please do chime in. Same to you guys if I'm missing anything. Okay, so I wanted to start with the language on the ballot, and I just thought it was funny to include, especially as a reporter. I feel like our leaders like to put in as many words as possible into a sentence on all our referendum questions, but you definitely do want to read this in its entirety before you go out to vote. I have provided what I hope is a simple translation. So as we heard from Jason, the district is basically saying, we need to go to referendum to exceed the caps that Wisconsin sets on school revenue limits. Can we please have $507 million to renovate or replace 10 schools? And that's actually 7 buildings, but 3 of them or 4 of them are shared spaces with other schools. So as it says in the question, the money would go toward really modernizing the school buildings. So that could look different at every school. The district is currently in the process of gathering information from all these communities to decide what they want and need, what their dream space looks like. But it could be new furniture, nice technology, open spaces, better lighting, things that today's student would need in a school. And the district says this would really help them learn. It'll make them want to come to school at all. In addition to that, the big 3 things here are accessibility, safety, and sustainability. So some schools will need things like ramps, elevators, wider doors in order to be more accessible to students, among other things, and also some enhanced safety features. So I have toured some of these schools, and one thing that you notice when you go in is that you actually have to walk into the school in the hallway to get to the front desk. Of course, you need to be buzzed in or something like that, but the district is saying, maybe we could put a separate space, a secure entrance to keep strangers out of the school until they're vetted by someone. And another pretty big chunk of the change would go towards sustainability. That's because the board recently passed a resolution saying that the district would be at 0 greenhouse gas emissions by 2045. It is a lofty goal, but it was done in part because of students. So the district has a lot of really strong environmental advocates, and they pushed for this change. So that could go towards things like geothermal heating and cooling, which I'm still figuring out what that is exactly, but stuff that makes the school greener. In addition, and perhaps the most important to the district, are these basically mechanical system improvements. So one of the big things that I hear from principals is that I go to school in a school that has no air conditioning, or it's like 10% air conditioned. That can be really challenging for students and staff to have to learn, with a bunch of stinky kids all around on a hot day. So a lot of them are saying, please, we need air conditioning. Another big thing, some of the schools have boiler heating systems, and I believe one of the schools has the original boiler system that was built almost a century ago. And the problem with that is that they actually have to custom make the parts in order to do any kind of fixes on it, because they no longer make the parts for those old systems. So those mechanical system things are some of the most important to the district. And as I'm sure you remember, the district last went to referendum in 2020, and this was part of that. It's a new library at La Follette High School. As you can see, it looks pretty nice, a space that students might want to hang out in. But of course, every school will be different, but this gives you a little bit of an idea of what it could look like in terms of renovation. Also, as we heard from Jason, if this passes, your property taxes will increase by a couple $100 a year. That starts in fall 2025, to my knowledge, and that will continue until the debt is gone, which the district estimates will take about 23 years. I'm also going to show you like some of the proposed plans. Everything is subject to change, but right now the district has put forward this option, which would be completely rebuilding 5 of the buildings, or also 8 schools. And that would cost 443 of the 507 million. The rest would go towards renovating 2 elementary schools, Crestwood and Anana. So I have included the years that each school was originally built. As you can see, the oldest one here is the Sherman Middle School and Shabazz City High School location, built in 1928. The rest were built around the 1940s through the 1960s. They've all seen renovations or additions in some form, but the original schools still stand, and that is pretty old. So that timeline, if it were to be the official plan, it would be 2 sites per year. Construction would go through 2030, so lasting 4 years, and it would start with the Shabazz City High School and Sherman Middle School location. Basically, I think the district did this to kind of stagger it. So some schools will finish throughout those 4 years while others are just beginning. And that's kind of to make sure that all this doesn't happen all at once. So you might be wondering, why are these the schools that the district chose? As I said, they're pretty old. The district completed a long-range facilities plan, and that includes a report on the conditions of every building in the district. So 2 of the school locations received D grades, meaning they are past their prime, and all the others received C grades, which means they're nearing the end of their life expectancy. And the middle schools were part of the priority because in 2020, when the district went to referendum, they said, okay, we're doing the high schools. Now, next time, we will focus on our remaining high school and the middle schools. So, like I said, mechanical needs, that was really the #1 thing that they were looking at. And they used that condition report to identify which ones had mechanical systems that are on the verge of breaking down, need to be addressed as soon as possible. And they also considered whether these locations had empty fields nearby. And that's because the district would like to just build on the empty green space, have the students stay in the school, learn in the old building, then demolish it later on. They say it's less of a disruption if we just have students move next door. They don't need to be shuttled to different schools within the district, nor do they need to be in like mobile classrooms. In terms of deciding whether to renovate or replace schools, of course, still subject to change, but the benchmark here was if the cost to renovate a school exceeds 60% of the total cost to replace it, let's just replace it. And the 5 that are up for replacement, the cost to renovate them would be 80% of the total cost to replace it. I think the district's argument there is we could just spend a little bit more, extend the building's life expectancy even longer, save taxpayers perhaps more money in the long term, so we don't have to keep renovating every couple decades. And as I said, they think that perhaps renovations could be a little more disruptive to students. Of course, there's probably the argument that any kind of construction could be disruptive regardless, but they think renovations are less disruptive. However, if the district were to renovate all the buildings instead of replacing any of them, you'd save, I think, probably $90 million is the estimate. So that's something to consider. And Jason touched on this a little bit, but I think this has been perhaps less of a priority for the district in terms of deciding whether to go to referendum. The schools are being used at a lesser capacity than desired, and that's not likely to change much within the next 5 years. Of course, that's linked to enrollment declines across Wisconsin and in Madison. On top of that, as I said, not likely to get much better according to projections from UW-Madison. They've said that enrollment is going to continue decreasing for the next 5 years by about 9%. However, the district says, you know, actually enrollment stayed flat last school year. That actually defied projections. So perhaps maybe things could get better or stay the same. And Madison is likely to grow by 100,000 residents by 2050. People are likely to bring kids along with them. So I think the big question here, what happens if the referendum doesn't pass? And what the district has told me is that these buildings are only going to get older. Students are still going to go to them. And the reality is that many buildings in the district are very old. Many of them are not in great condition. So at some point, these renovations or reconstruction needs to happen. But of course, it all depends on the voter. You would be saving money if this were to fail. But that, I think, is all. I hope you learned something from it.
Thank you, Kayla. In summary, we have really old buildings and kids need to be in safe places. I think that's the summary. Deferred maintenance and potential growth of Madison. No, I think it may have just gone dead. So the little cards are flying around, and write your comments, your questions, and discussion points, and we'll collect them and we'll get to those. So last but not least, I want to welcome, I'll let you guys read much of this as you want, but we want to welcome Dr. Joe Gothard, who is currently serving as the Madison Metropolitan School District Superintendent. He previously was most recently in St. Paul as the superintendent of the St. Paul schools. He was recognized as the Minnesota Superintendent of the Year. He was recognized as the National Superintendent of the Year. That's not on there, right? The National Superintendent of the Year from AASA, which is the Association for School Administrators, American Association for School Administrators, and quite a high honor. Dr. Gothard actually started his education in the Madison School District. So it's only fitting that he's back with the Madison School District. And as you look at this list, I think that Dr. Gothard has done most jobs in the Madison schools. So he knows what he's doing when he's here in the Madison School Districts. And we're glad that he was willing to come back. One other piece, I trust him and respect him enough that Dr. Gothard was the only non-alumni I asked to serve on my alumni board when I was Dean of the School of Education. So he was my only non-alumni on my alumni board. So welcome back and thank you very much.
Thank you, Dean Underwood, very much. Good evening, everyone. It's so great to be with you tonight. And duties as assigned, I brushed sticks off of the sidewalk at Midvale this morning as I walked in. So she means it when she says I've had every job. This Madison Metropolitan School District means a lot to me. It really does. Born and raised here and 20 great years in the district before departing from Minnesota for a few years, but I'm happy to be back. I'm going to go through some of this very quickly. Kayla, first of all, impressive. Certainly listening to what we're saying and really appreciate your recap of the facilities referendum. But I want to just give everybody a sense because a few of you asked before we started, how many students, how many staff do you have? And Paul, I was off with staff. I apologize. I've been in a few districts, so sometimes the numbers even get to me. But as you can see, this is our last third Friday count, 25,247, 52 schools and over 6,000 staff. These are the demographic breakdowns of our student body. So you can see about 60% of our students identify as racial in one of the racial categories defined by the state. And of note, because I know so many of you have some experience in Madison, in 1970, if you were looking at the same list, it would be 13%. So, 100,000 more people in Madison since 1970. 13% students of color in the district at that time. Today, 60% students of color. I think it's really important to note that. And you can see our English language learners, again, continues to go up. Our economically disadvantaged is, again, collected by the students who qualify for free and reduced price meals. And that has hovered right around that 50% for some time, as I recall. You can see some of the highlights of what we offer: dual language immersion in 21 of our schools. Did you know that 61% of our high school students earn college credit before graduation? That has gone up remarkably, again, since the time that I left, and I'm really proud of that. Staff should feel excellent about that. We still continue to offer string instruments in elementary school. Some of you may know that was much earlier, many, many years ago, but still offered at our elementary schools, 26 National Merit Scholars. We set a record for our district in terms of the number of advanced placement tests taken last year. Students go to the Alliance Center and spread out, and through a very rigid testing schedule are able to take advanced placement tests. And again, 27 schools offer full or half day for kindergarten, pre-kindergarten. Again, a big commitment that the last few boards have made to help Madison's children. These are the highlights of areas that we're looking at in terms of addressing for the referendum. Our budget goals, and I want to get right into, Bob, how long is this video? I'm going to skip through that. I think we'll talk through some of it because I want to get into some of your questions as well. That video, and again, if you go to our website, it's on there. It really does a nice job of explaining school finance in Wisconsin, but it is 4 minutes long. But I want to go through these highlights. As Jason noted, that we see around a $30 million revenue gap from 23 to 25. Now, not spending revenue, the amount of money that we receive, while at the same time, our costs continue to go up. So right away, we're behind in terms of how we are supposed to continue offering the services that we offer, that our students need to be supported, that our families want and expect from their schools, and to keep making sure that we're addressing the challenges or opportunities that our students have to learn in an individual way that is most successful for them, individualizing their education. One thing to note, and this gets very confusing, and I came back from Minnesota and thought that the district that I was in had the largest special education funding gap that there was, until I found out from Bob Soldner, our CFO, no, Madison takes it. So 1975, the Individual Disabilities Education Act passes. And I am proud to say, I've talked about this in Minnesota and in other states that I presented in, that my entire K-12 experience in Madison was in an inclusive educational environment. You walk through the doors at LVM, Senator LaFollette, where I attended, and every student was welcome there. Every student was supported there, and every student was thought of as a student just like their peers. And I'm really proud of that. However, the federal government was also supposed to fund and reimburse states 40% of their costs. And to date, that number has been 10, 12, 13%. And because of that, we offer the services that are mandated, and we should. And I want to be clear about this. We absolutely should and must. But we take $66.4 million from our general fund, and we've reimbursed the special education fund to make up for that difference. And that number has only gotten worse. In the entire state, this isn't just Madison, you all. This is 1.5 billion with a B, billion dollars in the state. And again, that's more than double what it was in my previous state. I believe it was 800 million. It was 42 million in my larger district there. So I was very shocked to learn about that gap when I came back to Madison. 4-year-old kindergarten, the state funds us at 50%. And we offer full day. And we offer full day for a few reasons. One, because we want to ensure that our youngest learners get off to the very best start possible. But the other thing is it's very difficult to have a mixed day with childcare, with parents and guardians having to get back and forth. And we want to make sure that we can provide a consistent educational environment for students and that their parents can be off to work and doing the things that they need to do. We will make sure that students get to and from school and are having the best leg forward for a successful K through 12 enrollment after completing 4K. This is more in the facilities. I won't go through that. Kayla did a nice job of covering that. And really clear as well, and this gets confusing, that operations and capital are two different things. The 507 million that we're asking for, we're not able to use for any of the operating expenses. So we couldn't use any of that 507 million to make up for or reimburse for the $66.4 million. Those are two different funds that are regulated differently as well. And this, I'm sorry, this PowerPoint is both the operations and the facilities. So I'm just going through them to make sure I'm not missing anything. The operating referendum, and the words are before you. I didn't break it down like Kayla did, but I do want to say that these referendum questions do go through bond council. They are approved. They have to be legally looked at, and the city election officials have to accept them to be on the ballot. So there are some required language. We get very little say in how to describe that. Of course, we can use adjectives and things like that. But there are some really important components to make sure that this question is legal and has been reviewed. So you can see the operating referendum is in a 4-year cycle of increasing our amount above the state imposed revenue limits by 30 million in year 1, 30 million in year 2, 20 million in year 3, and 20 million in year 4. That amount then would be constant throughout. It's called recurring referendum, meaning that we could exceed the state revenue caps by $100 million thereafter. And you've heard a few times tonight too how much the tax impact would be for a homeowner, and that average price home that we're using for our figure, just to share with you, is $457,000 is the average price home. So all the figures that you see on the tax impact are based on that amount. It's a calculation that we use. On our website, we do have a calculator, so you can place your home value in there and see what the impact would be. And it has it broken out by the 4 years as well, because this again goes up each year, 30, 30, 20, 20. It will show you each year how much that incremental growth will be until that constant is hit. So why do we believe that it's important for us to ask our local property taxpayers to exceed our state imposed revenue caps? Because the costs of operating our district are at a point where we are going to have to make some really important decisions. And some of the ramifications, impacts of those decisions could be our ability to retain high quality teachers and staff. Make no mistake, every district in Dane County and every district that I know of right now is struggling for their workforce. And this is not just urban school districts. I know of districts, I will not name them, that are affluent that have for years had just a very high caliber of education. And to me, it's alarming to even see districts in those cases are still hiring teachers after school has started. So this is truly a national challenge that we're facing, retaining high quality teachers and making sure that we can offer them a high quality wage to start, and that will continue. We want to continue investing in 4K. I've made it very clear to my staff, I believe in 4K. I believe in making sure that our youngest learners have the very earliest opportunity to join one of our school communities, and both a social and achievement academic growth that's noted from that, I think is an important thing. It also supports our families. It supports our families in making sure that they can be part of the workforce, that their children are in a high quality program all day, and that they too are building in that community. Our multilingual education, preparing students for the future. As I said, we offer dual language immersion in 21 sites, but wouldn't it be impressive if we could reach out and talk with some of our other communities about what languages they would desire? And would we have the ability to offer more in Madison? It's something we've talked about. Madison was talked about for a number of years, and there are districts around the country that do this in a very high quality way. Last, we want to make sure that we can continue to offer well-rounded opportunities. We know that so much of a student's day is not just the classes that they take on their schedule, it's the clubs and activities and connections they have with their school community outside of that school day as well. So again, you're looking right here at the $100 million over 4 years, the operating referendum, $26 estimated monthly tax impact after year 1. Okay, so that would be beginning in year 27, 28, and each year thereafter. This is the total of year 1, 2, 3, and 4 would be $87 per month. And again, that's on that $457,000 average price home. Okay, so again, different from the 507 million and different from the way that that is funded. That's spread out over 23 years. This one would be impacted to its full extent right away after year 4 and then thereafter, recurring. So it would continue. And I think I covered it. Let me just, since I have time left, I didn't see the 1 minute yet. I'm going to just go back and make sure I didn't miss anything. I think we'll move on. Dean Underwood, thank you.
No, that's not, that's an extra mic. That's a backup mic. So we have 2 of them. Thank you. Can you thank them all again, would you? I have an entire fistful of questions, so thank you all for that. And I'm trying to to figure them out and to put them in some kind of order or something like that. But I have a couple here about consolidation, school consolidation. And so here's state funding. Let me start with those 2. And I think you guys can tag in and tag out, right? You can back and forth. I'll give you both of them. Was it correct that some schools are only at 60% capacity? Could they be consolidated? If schools are at only 60% capacity and get rebuilt, will the new buildings be 40% smaller? Is that what the price tag reflects?
School consolidation would be, I would say a few things. The 2020 referendum was on the high schools. We need our 4 high schools. They're geographically located in places that are part of that community. So it would have been really difficult for us to imagine, I think, consolidating and perhaps closing a high school. The last high school closed in Madison was Central High School in 1969. So we're not in that place right now where we have that kind of growth and movement through the city. The next rung of schools are middle schools. They are geographically throughout the city. There's 12 of them. 13 actually with Badger Rock, that's on a joint school. And again, we are going to need middle schools in MMSD. We really are. To think about taking one middle school offline and consolidating others. One, there is the chance that students would have to leave their neighborhood to go to another middle school. That's been done in Madison before, way long ago. I see Carol Karstensen shaking her head. Maybe you've made, and Barb, maybe you've made some of those decisions. But the other thing is that we also don't know what kind of other costs might come with that. Be it transportation. Will we have the number of transportation has been a challenge. Are we going to create our own transportation issues, moving students about the city? Are we going to take one school because of consolidation and have that be at 100% capacity or at or near capacity? And the other thing that I want everyone to think about is something I didn't hear about, at least at the start of my career, that I hear about all the time now, and that's class size. Utilization is the way that we use buildings. And I think we could all understand that buildings are used differently today than they were 10, 20, 30 years ago, whether it be technology, whether it be flexible space, but class size is class size. I was in some schools today, and I will not name them. And there were some classrooms that were pretty full on the first day. And it made me think, I know more students may want to come there, but I don't know that we'd have space for them. So I think we'd have to look at the program impact that we would have on any consolidation at this point. And I would also, it wouldn't be that I would recommend consolidation to the board until we see that enrollment dip year after year going down significantly, where that would be a feasible decision for MMSD. And then lastly, the trends on enrollment, I think, are really difficult right now because of these last 4 years. I think it's really hard for us to look at and understand what is this going to look like in the years to come. There's been a lot of volatility in communities.
Hopefully that answered those questions. Yes, thank you. I'm going to rely on feedback. Thank you very much. So I'm going to stick on this facilities thing for a second, for a few minutes, if we could. And I got some, and then we're going to go into declining enrollment after that. Okay. We could play like Jeopardy. Declining enrollment for 200, please. Existing debts. Have we paid off the last referendum?
If we're talking about the 2020 referendum, we have not. That too is amortized over a period of years. I wasn't here for that passage. Was it 20 years, Bob? So 2020 to 2040 roughly. And that one too is spread out over that time. I do not have the monthly impact figure on hand right now. So similar, they'll be overlapped.
But Jason, let's talk about that's facilities referendum. And I said I was going to stay on facilities, but there's another part about operating referenda. And there are operating referenda that sunset, and there are operating referenda that continue. And you made mention of how some of those bounce back and forth, and depending on how state spending goes. So the same kind of question of, have we paid off our previous operating referenda?
Well, it depends which one you're talking about. So there have been 8 of them in the Madison School District, 7 of which have passed. In the aughts, we did in the city, and MMSD isn't just the city because it has some other areas that are not in the city, but a number of them that passed in the aughts were time limited. So they were temporary, if you will. The ones that have passed, the 4-year referendum that passed in 2016 and that was phased in over 4 years, and then the 2020 operating referendum that was passed over 4 years, those were permanent referenda. So the term of art is recurring. And so those are still with us. Again, the revenue limit changes independent of what the referendum is because of student enrollment and other things. but their impact to the revenue limit was permanent. And this 4-year referendum would also be, it would be phased in over 4 years, but then it would be present after that. And again, over where, and it gets built into the base, so to speak, over time. And then the one other thing that I should have added when I was talking about the facilities, the utilization rate, is several of those were for joint buildings. So they were middle school and elementary school. And what we were giving you in our chart was the middle school utilization rate, because the middle schools tended to be the bigger part of those buildings. But there is an elementary school utilization rate also for those buildings, and it tends to be a little bit higher, as I recall. That information, I think, is in our report, but I hope that's responsive to the question.
Yeah, I took the question generally as have we paid off our debts before? And I think that that's an important kind of piece. Any additions to that? No. Okay, continuing under facilities for 600. At 2028, the tax on an average home will increase by $1,400. After that, taxes will increase by about 1,000 per year. Does that mean 1,000 every year thereafter? I think that's a question about what's the cumulative effect. Jason, you want to start that one?
Get it? Okay, there we go. It's just 1,400 by the 4th year, and then that's what it is. And until such time as the bonds are paid off. Right. Then when the bonds are paid off, then it would go down to 1,000. That would be, of the two, so that would be like 23 years from now, so it'll be a minute.
Does that answer that one? Yep. See, this is great. We're asking an economist a question and getting a clear answer. Thank you very much. Specifically regarding the facilities referendum, how will MMSD ensure that community resources are spent equitably, including among diverse contractors and workers?
Thank you. We've got policies that guide decisions that we make, requests for proposals. We're working with, for the 2020 referendum, we worked with a construction managing firm. We worked with, we had an owner rep. We work with other consultants to make sure that we are abiding by our policy and using those hiring practices to the best of our abilities. The other thing I'll share is that we're not a general contracting firm. We have facilities folks that clean buildings and can fix things to some degree. But when it comes for these large renovations or replacements, that's work that we hire out. So, we very much rely on the contractors, the general contractor that we hire, and then they work with us to hire the various subcontractors to conduct the work. So if there needs to be work on our policies in terms of hiring local and hiring minority-owned businesses, that's something that the district definitely wants to make sure we are making a priority, and we'll partner with the community.
Thank you. Wait, I just had it in my hand. There it is. What are the plans? Are there plans for a dream space based on input that's already been collected so that building plans and proposals took those into account? If not, what was the basis for those recommendations?
So right now we are meeting at those sites that have been identified, the 10, and the process of just gathering individuals to talk about what the idea is. I mean, when you talk about, for example, Sherman and Shabazz City High School, there's a big green space there. And the plan right now would be to replace that. So to build new on that green space and then demo the existing school. And that's where all the parking lot and green space would be relocated to. But for that community, they need to hear that plan, and we need to get some feedback and reaction to that. But that's at a very high level. Once we get into more of the design, of course, teachers, staff, students who are using those spaces will have input on those final designs. We're referring to that as creating dream boards. Our communications team is here right now, And they have a really nice way of displaying different phases of this work. And right now, again, we're at that very high level. We're not approved yet, but we are sharing with the community that once we do, these will be the next steps, for us to create these new learning spaces.
What does a full classroom mean in actual numbers in the Madison district?
A full classroom. Well, let's see. There's my classroom that had desks and lab tables, the biology lab. So, it's a little bit different. We base it on the average class sizes that are, determined on our agreement with our teachers. So it's going to be different based on those sizes. As you know, many of you have been in our buildings. Very few of them are the same, that's for sure. I was in one today in the kindergarten room. I walked in, I'm like, this is amazing. But in others, it's very small. So there are some limitations at times in some of the buildings. But what we have to do, especially anytime we're investing resources that the community's approved, is we've got to make sure that these are flexible spaces. If they're good today, we want them to be good for several years and for many purposes. Like, what if you all of a sudden lose a kindergarten section and add a first grade? Is there a difference? So we have to be thoughtful in that way as well, that we're not so rigid in our design that the school is only designed for the needs of today. It has to be designed for needs of the future. Some of them we may not know.
And whoever asked that question, were you also asking about class size, or were you asking about facilities? It was an online question. Okay. Go ahead. Let me repeat that because we do have people who are online and other people who might not have heard it. Thank you very much. What is the current collective bargaining agreement in terms of class size for elementary, middle, and high school? Is that right?
I don't have my numbers out. Dr. McRae, are you able to share some of that with me? Yeah. Oh, thank you. Look at that. Current for grades. Glasses, this is small. All right. So we have two different designations, and it's based on, we have smaller classrooms in school communities that have a higher concentrations of students with greater needs for reduced price meals, for example. So the class size ranges in K through 1 are 20 to 23 or 18 to 21. So again, that's based on the needs of the community. The minimum size is 15. And in special subject classrooms, Phi-Ed and things like that, it would be 30. So that's K through 1. 2 through 3, 20 to 27 is the range. 18 to 24 if it is a school that qualifies for extra support. And again, 15 and 30 are those minimum and maximum for special classrooms. Grades 4 and 5, 28 or 25 if the school has greater needs. Same on the minimum and the special subject. Middle school, 30 or 25, depending on the school needs. 15 minimum and 40 for those special subjects. And 9 through 12, 30 and 28. Minimum size 15, and again, special subjects 40. So that's how we allocate our resources. In the spring when we're allocating resources to schools, we have to look at the physical layout. We have to look at the number of students enrolled, and we have to provide students or staff buildings the resources to distribute those class sections throughout their building based on the size.
Declining enrollment, a whole series for declining enrollment. And could you pass the water, please? Thank you. While we have you in the hot seat, why is enrollment decreasing when Madison population is increasing? And let me give you another one though. What is the impact of Madison School District what is the impact on Madison of children going to neighboring schools?
I'll start with that question. We have 1,000 students who open enroll out of MMSD. So to any, the state open enrollment, any district, I would guess most are adjacent. You can name those communities. 400 come to Madison. I'm sorry, I had that wrong. 1,400 leave, 400 come in. We have a net loss of 1,000. I apologize. I'll say that one more time. 1,400 students open enroll out of Madison. 400 students open enroll into Madison for a net loss of 1,000. Okay, so that's different from a family who decides to send their child to Edgewood, for example. That doesn't get counted in that count. These are open enrollment, state open enrollment leavers and enterers who come into the district. So it's important to note that there are other options that aren't calculated in that figure, in those figures. Declining enrollment. What was the first question? What's the reason for declining enrollment? I think it could be a number of things. One, there's fewer children. There are more options. There is certainly a narrative around public schools in this country, in this state, in this city. And those are all things that impact enrollment and choices families have to make. I got to welcome hundreds of 4K and kindergarten families today. I saw tears. Yeah, I saw lots of tears. It was emotional. So I know for a fact that people want to be part of MMSD. So I believe that we need to continue to talk about ways that the district needs support. We have to deliver to our community what we said we were going to: high quality, safe, consistent education, one in which we don't build every year only to reduce the year after. There's nothing worse, decisions I've had to make in the past, where you build something great only to have to take it apart because you don't have the funding for it to continue. And I think that weighs on parents. I gave you a kind of tongue in cheek about the 5th grade strings. Some of you remember when strings was in what grade? Long, long ago it was. So those are things that have changed over the years. So that's just one example of what people really want and want to expect from their school district. With declining enrollment, again, I've started a group that's meeting in our district so that we can talk about enrollment in a more way. I don't think it's something we've talked about all that much in terms of creating a strategy. And that's something that in the future, I definitely want to involve the community as a whole to try to learn and understand how we can create a sustainable enrollment in our district. And that figure that Kayla mentioned about the growth of Madison, again, that's people. It's not all good. It's not going to be 100,000 children coming, but the potential is there. And I want to be ready. Madison is a destination city. Our school district needs to be a destination as well.
Thank you. I want to move, considering time, I want to move from facilities to operating. And we have a number of questions about state funding. So are you guys ready to move from facilities to operating? Yes? Okay. So if we have time, we'll go back to a couple of the facilities questions.
Thank you for reminding me. So if it's at 60% and we rebuild it, could we create a situation where it's only 40% utilized? Was that? No, I think right now what we want to do is make sure we're not limiting ourselves. So any renovation or replacement that we do, we want to ensure that it's going to fit the current students, but we also have to look for growth for the future as well. We don't want a whole wing that's empty, but we also do not want to create a school that is stuffed elbow to elbow, wall to wall either. So those are decisions that are made with the design team. They make recommendations to a team that looks at that. These are folks that do this work all over for different size buildings, different capacities. And again, we don't want to limit ourselves. We certainly don't want to build with in excess either.
And just to put a pin in that, in terms of projecting enrollment, there's a fine science of projecting enrollment that demographers do, that I mean, demographers from private demographers from UW-Madison and other kind of companies that work with districts across the state of Wisconsin and across the United States and do just that work. They, you know, they predict it.
They do. And one of the figures I'll share with you tonight is that from last September until the end of the year, Madison grew by 729 students. And nowhere can I see that listed as that's going to happen. So a lot of times we talk about these declines that come out of nowhere. We rarely talk about, hey, we grew by almost 1,000 students. Now you can talk to some buildings and they definitely felt it, you know, depending on where located in the city and, you know, buildings that were already full or near full. So again, Dean Underwood is right. It's really difficult to use all the available data to make these building-based decisions.
Thank you. So going to state funding. So you're up, Jason. Going to state funding. One thing I want to remind people is that that in every state in the United States, every state constitution has an education clause. And that education clause says something that's similar to our Article 10, Section 3 education clause that says basically that every child in our state has a right to an education, and an adequate education, an equitable education. And in ours, it says as uniform as practicable. But it is the state's constitutional obligation to provide that education, the state's constitutional obligation to provide that education. So now let's talk about the state. Jason, what is the role of the state funding levels from 2000 to now? Could you give us more information?
What is the role?
It says role, but it is probably like, what have the state funding levels, how have the state funding levels changed from 2000 to now? Could you give us more information?
Yeah. Well,
hope I
you know, we were talking mainly about the revenue limits, but there's more than that. I mean, you know, the revenue limit for a lot of the aughts was indexed to inflation. So in other words, it was tied to the changes in the consumer price index. And you saw that in my slide, you know, which, by the way, all the charts that I showed you, you can find at wispolicyforum.org. And it's all there on our website for free. So you can check that out. But it was indexed to inflation during the aughts. Then in 2012, it had about a 5.5% decrease, the revenue limit on average across the state. And then since then, it has not risen at the rate of inflation. So it was, you know, it's just a couple more back. There you go. So there you can see that, you know, during the aughts, it was, you know, they were moving closely together, inflation and the revenue limit. There was this big drop in 2012. And then since then, particularly in recent years, you know, it hasn't totally caught up. Then, so that's kind of looking at what the general funding are for school districts, if you will. And then separately, there's all these categories of state aid for special education, English learners, you know, student transportation, you know, aid for sparsely populated rural districts. There's many different categories. And, you know, in particular, but the big dog out of those, the one that really matters the most is special education aid. And that also has not, you know, kept up over, you know, since you've seen over the last several decades, the state reimbursement aid for the special education costs that district have, that has not kept up with what the costs were. The aid has actually increased about at the rate of inflation, but the costs for special education students have gone up even more than that. And so what happens is the reimbursement rate has gone down. Now, in recent years, the state has increased it a little bit, just not a ton. You know, so it still went from 26% to 31%, you know, reimbursement rate or something like that. So again, we could talk for like 5 hours to that question, but like that's a 2-minute answer.
can we have, we're coming up to 8 o'clock. Can I have 5 more minutes? Okay, 5 more minutes. And I'm not gonna, there's a question about vouchers, and there's a question about whether Madison school districts get shortchanged. Could we, you want to try that? And do you want to do the shortchanged one, Joe, or?
I think, yeah, shortchanged is, well, I'll say this. I mean, all of us are here because we want every child in the city to be successful. And there's a lot of variables that are involved in that, too many to name tonight. One of them that's been constant is the underfunding of public schools in Wisconsin. That's empirical. It's right there and it's in front of us. So I think that if we want to begin to address some of the other the variables that impact the success of children, that constant sustainable funding is something of the utmost importance. It is to me, so that I can have a balanced budget each year and present that to the public, ask our Board of Education to approve it. And we know that it's aligned with what we believe and what what we believe it will take for children to be successful and what our families and students want.
Yeah, I mean, this is very complex, how the voucher and independent charter school students affect the finances of the Madison schools. But, in very simple terms, we can say that as the students shift from MMSD to either like an independently authorized charter school, like a charter school that was authorized by the UW system, or to a voucher school, there would be a decrease in the education funding that would be available to the district. There would be some impact to that, and it's very complicated, and it depends a lot on factors for a given budget. But in general, we could say that.
The uncomplicated part is that voucher and independent charter schools take over $769 million a year out of education funds. That's just the non-complicated part of that. That figure represents the tuition payments that are paid to the independent charter schools, not charter schools that are part of instrumentalities, part of the school, but and voucher schools, and those payments get paid, that real amount of dollar at statewide, 769 million statewide annually. And we have 2 more. And then will you all willing to hang around for a little bit and talk to people? Great. The Wisconsin legislature has spent many of our tax dollars carelessly, and I believe that we should not have to make up for the recklessness of our legislators. That's a statement, but I thought I would share it with you. At this point, is the ballot box the only place we can express our opposition? And I think that going back to nonpartisanship, which the League is nonpartisan, and my statement that public schools really aren't a partisan kind of issue, but we live in a democracy, so it always comes back to the ballot box. I have one of my favorite t-shirts, although Sue Jennick's t-shirt is great. Sue Jennick's got a t-shirt that says voting is my superpower. I have a t-shirt that says democracy is not a spectator sport. I like that one, right? I mean, it all comes to the ballot box, right? The ballot box on referendum, the ballot box on state legislators as well. So yes, it always comes back to the ballot box. And I'm going to let you guys, do you have any closing comments there,
Well,
Jason?
just very quickly to that as well. I mean, you can always reach out for or against the amendment, the referendum. You can always reach out to the school board members. There are opportunities to speak, about the Madison schools budget at board meetings. And then the last thing is the referendum is just simply a question to give the school district the authority to exceed revenue limits, but the school board can still make a decision about to what degree they would use that authority that they would gain from the voters. So, when you say, well, even after the referendum passes, there's still an opportunity to weigh into the school board, the Board of Education, about what you would like to see them do with whatever authority comes out of the vote. So just make clear about that.
Um, I think I would reiterate what you said. Board meetings are the place to be. I'm not typically there in person, but I do watch all of them live. And it's always interesting to hear what the public has to say. I do think the board is listening. So it is a great opportunity to be heard.
Just want to thank everybody for coming tonight. If you want to continue to support information, reach out through that QR code, through our Let's Talk feature on the website. We're happy to provide you information that you'd like to share, provide you additional information that you can share with people that are asking you. It's really important that we're informed about these really big questions. This was not an easy thing to show up in May and say, Board of Education, let's do this. But I knew it was important to this community. It's one of the reasons I chose to come before July, so that I had the responsibility for this. I didn't want to say it was previous administration. It was me. And I really want to work with this community to do great things for our kids. So thank you all very much.
And yes, thank you all very much for being here. I'm sorry I couldn't get to all of the questions, but thanks to the league for having this forum, and thanks to all three of you. Thanks. Oh, wait. Clicker.
If you want to discuss what issues that came up, we've got a bunch of discussion questions. Please let me know. We can have you join our discussion groups. Program at lwvdanecounty.org. Remember, we have upcoming events, book discussion on gerrymandering, election reflections, responsible gun laws, and then a book on One Nation Under Guns. Please, if you have not already, make sure that you fill out your interest ballot. We'd love to know what kind of topics you would be interested in. Pick the 3 that you would like, or add something to other. There is a ballot box as you leave. Please put your, let us know what you think. And of course, remember, November 5th, please vote. Thank you all for coming, and thank the University of Wisconsin South Madison Partnership for use of their wonderful facilities. Thank you all for coming. Safe trip home.